concept of a mode of production is among the first newcomers to Marxism will encounter. This is for good reason, even simplified explanations providing a compelling and practical framework for situating broad stretches of human history. However, whilst such simplified explanations are useful, they can become detrimental if taken as a shortcut around deeper investigation, or, in the worst instances, as phraseology with which to hide poor or malicious analysis. With more advanced discussions of modes of production largely confined to academic work, these kinds of errors are common. There is a need for a more complex conversation. Over the next few minutes, we intend to outline why, beginning with a simple explanation of the concept, then touching on Marx's own contradictory handling of modes of production, and a crucial debate arising from the concept since. We urge you to take this conversation forward yourselves, and we've included materials to aid you with an initial group discussion on this subject in the video description. Welcome to Approaching Marxism. In the sense the term is most commonly deployed, a mode of production refers to an epochal phase in the development of humanity's productive forces. It is the conceptual framework by which Marxists distinguish between, for example, capitalism, feudalism, or antiquity. Crucially, this framework situates production as the ultimate, though not only, determining factor in human history. To explain this, the term is broken down further. A mode of production is composed of two elements: relations of production, that is, how production is organised, and property relations, and instruments of production, tools, raw materials, and so on. Each mode of production, or epoch in the development of the productive forces, is a unity of distinct relations and instruments of productions, these two factors conditioning each other. Where they come into insoluble contradiction, as in a case where the relations of production hold back the development of the productive forces, for example, when feudal relations of economic bondage held back capitalist production, tying workers to the land and capital to the crown, this produces seismic ruptures and revolutions. A mode of production is thus also an epoch of class struggle. This is the simplistic explanation of the concept. It is derived from components of Marx's work, for example, the German ideology and the preface to a contribution to the critique of political economy, but only codified into this formulation by subsequent authors and works. For example, Stalin's Dialectical and Historical Materialism, or José María Sison's Basics of Marxism-Leninism. Whilst useful in providing an orientation for further study, this introductory conception is inadequate when mobilized in an explanatory capacity. As the historian Jaros Banaji points out, doing so posits an abstract historical law which applies in all periods of history, a definite line of development, something Marx always explicitly rejected. To begin to conceptually grasp modes of production in more depth, we need to consider Marx's own use of the term. whilst he certainly mobilises the concept in the broad epochal sense already indicated, this is not the only way that Marx deploys it. Throughout particularly Capital and the notebooks written in preparation for it, known as the Grundrisse, Marx repeatedly uses the term mode of production to refer to specific technical processes. For example, in the Grundrisse, Marx refers to agriculture as a mode of production sui generis, that is, defined by technical conditions peculiar to it. In just the first volume of Capital, he refers to handicraft, the manufacture system, the concentration of workers, and many other features he considers as technical elements in the development of industrial capitalism as modes of production. This lack of separation does not pose a problem for his analysis. Indeed, Marx's unwillingness to treat these phenomena as static concepts highlights the real focus of his approach. This is very clearly highlighted by chapters 13 to 15 of the first volume of Capital, where Marx outlines his view of the development of machinery. Instead of the binary contradiction posited by the notion that the relations of production holding back the development of the means of production is the source of all changes or revolutions in production, a much more dynamic picture emerges. The development of the manufacture system stems from a simultaneous and integrated change in relations and means of production. The employment of handicraftsmen by a single capitalist, leading to the opening of workshops for the concentration of workers, which in turn leads to the isolation of the various functions of the handicraft labour process, providing the basis for machinery in the recombination of these isolated functions. Marx's concern throughout this analysis, indeed throughout all of Capital, is not the construction of broad historical generalizations. His concern is in identifying the historically determinate laws of capitalist production. Through his analysis, it becomes clear that this is not something which is reducible to a simple combination of wage labour and factories or machinery, but rather the combined result of a diverse ensemble of concrete relationships and technical processes. The epochal framework of a mode of production is an orientation toward the study of these phenomena, not a ready-formed explanation of their interaction or significance. Given the scope of modes of production as a conceptual framework, it is understandable that it stands at the core of many debates within Marxist historiography. Many of them are drawn together and commented on in Jaros Benagi's seminal essay, Modes of Production in a Materialist Conception of History. Whilst we will be returning to the broader range of these debates over time in this series, we want to focus on his core contention, that simplified understandings of modes of production often result in historical formalism. Though Benagi describes this vulgarization exclusively as a product of quote-unquote Stalinism, a clearly blinkered view given the dominance of the reductive framework so far outlined across tendencies, his observation on the problem remained cutting several decades later. By historical formalism, Benagi is referring to a line of thought which treats historical material purely as a verification of an already held general formulation. He identifies a number of ways this occurs in Marxist thought, and his handling of chattel slavery and the US plantation system is particularly revealing. Here, the maintenance of historical formalism requires rejecting Marx himself. As a formalist reading of modes of production can only understand capitalism as operating through wage labour, it precludes an understanding of the plantation system as a system of capitalist exploitation. As Marx and Benagi make clear, this completely misunderstands the real processes of this system, which was organised entirely for the production of capitalist wealth under the ownership of capitalists. The path of formalism leads to the revision of history. Whilst the importance of correctly understanding the concept of a mode of production and its ambiguities for historical analysis should now be clear, the immediate political importance of this understanding is perhaps uncertain. On this, we can speak plainly. As we have consistently argued through the rest of our work, as is made evident by the environmental crisis and the skinning of the earth by war's foul tread, the capitalist epoch of production is today coming to a long close. To stand any chance of navigating its collapse and successfully fighting for the next mode of production, that of communism, it is a vital necessity that we are clear upon the historically concrete nature of Marxist analysis. If the social basis of this next mode of production, the proletariat and oppressed, are to rise to the challenge of its formation, then they must be adequately armed with an analytic capable of understanding dynamic changes in production, identifying new technical bases for development and the relations they imply, and consciously developing these relations into economic laws of motion. If they are instead armed with tools that blinker them to real developments in favour of old and worn myths, then the result may only be failure. This much is certain. We hope this short piece has provided a useful provocation for further discussion on the development of these analyses. Now, it's over to you.